Vamos sair por aí. Vai conhecer o Rio. Vamos a todos os lugares. Or, as you Americans say, huh? Let's go see the town. Okay, sir.
Saludos Amigos.
If you're a fan of Disney and animation, then there's a good chance that you've heard about a little South American themed movie that the studio made back in the early 1940s. But before we take a look into this picture, we must talk about the history behind it. You'll understand later why this is important. Back in 1941, Walt Disney was asked by the US Department of State to go on a 3-month goodwill tour across South America. As part of the Good Neighbor policy, the mission was to maintain a good relationship between the United States and the Latin American countries so that the latter doesn't fully team up with the Nazis, to which they were dangerously close to doing so. And since characters like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck were very popular there, who better to be an ambassador to prove that Americans are cooler than white supremacists than Walt Disney himself? He was reluctant at first, but it turned out to be the perfect time for him to do some good for his country, and have this be like a world-exploring escape from the Union. Oh, did I forget to mention that 1941 was one of the worst years in Disney's history? Yes, the tour was a nice highlight, and Dumbo was the success that the company needed at the time, but it was the year that Walt Disney had his first taste of bitter failure since he found the great success with Mickey Mouse. The studio started out rough with both Pinocchio and Fantasia becoming box office bombs the year prior. They lost most of the European market because of World War II, and most notably, the animators went on strike, calling out the unfair hierarchy system that was established since the new building was made, demanding for better pay and better working conditions for all the employees, and fighting for the goal of making the studio fully unionized. Thankfully, by the end of the trip, the strikers won the battle and got the union representation they were looking for, but due to Walt's ignorance of the hierarchy problem in his own studio, especially with him at the top of it, the event left a trauma on him where he spent several years stepping away from animation and gained an unhealthy grudge against unions, a feeling that the company still has to this day.
We managed as an industry to negotiate a very good deal with the Directors Guild that reflects the value that the directors contribute to this great business. We wanted to do the same thing with the writers, and we'd like to do the same thing with the actors. There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic.
Well, to be fair, it's what Walt would have wanted! Anyways, back onto the Goodwill Tour, the goal wasn't just to strengthen the bond between the Americas. Walt also brought 18 of his crew that included Norm Ferguson, Frank Thomas, Mary Blair, and more to do research on the cultures of the countries they visited in order to make a special film. Something that could be like a symbol of the United States and Latin America's potential partnership that only Walt Disney and his team could deliver. And the result was the 1942 movie, Saludos Amigos. Did the movie actually do its job? Actually, yes. In a big way, in fact. Not only did it help strengthen the bond between the two Americas, but it also helped Americans have a better understanding of Latin American culture. It got nominated for 3 Oscars, and allowed the government to fund another Goodwill-based animated picture with Disney that became The Three Caballeros. However, even though it served its purpose in the early 1940s, what about now? Is the spirit of Disney's South America still as strong as it was all those decades ago? Well, let's find out. The story. Based on everything this movie tries to do, the important thing to keep in mind is that this is considered a propaganda film. The point of this is not to tell a story, in fact I should have opened this segment with quotes, but to serve a political purpose in order to lure South America into siding with the United States instead of the Nazis while the war was continuously growing. And the way to accomplish that is for the two regions to know each other and become friends through this one picture that has an established goal for each side. For the Americans, it's an educational guide on South American culture, presenting the elements that are both different and similar to what US viewers understand, especially in a time when Americans knew little to nothing about what was under their border.
Here the visitors were treated to an asado. choice cuts of meat. Mate, the Argentine tea.
As for the Latin Americans, this is like the US's tribute to some of their countries, giving them a spotlight to the world to show who they are through the lens of the most beloved cartoon producer at the time.
The saddle may be quickly converted into a bed, or catre.
Bed?
Also, in the context of a Disney feature, this is their first package film where the way it was constructed is with a bunch of cartoons that are thinly connected by the movie's central theme. In the case of Saludos Amigos, along with live-action clips of the team exploring the countries that bridge the segments, the shorts include comical cartoons that feature Donald Duck and Goofy, a narrative-driven one featuring a little airplane called Pedro, and an artistic scene where Donald returns called Aquarela do Brasil. Like I said before, it was able to accomplish what it wanted to do at the time, but what I wanted to look for when watching this was the answer to the big question. Can you still enjoy this movie without any of the historical context? Yeah, this is a case where its main asset is also its own Achilles heel. What's holding the film back is its dependency on its own history. Sure, I agree that there is a fascination that it has with the role it played in the 1940s for both Disney and the Good Neighbor policy, but most people won't know or care about that if they just want to jump straight into the movie. Without doing the homework beforehand, you're just left with something that feels like an old educational program, where it's meant to be shown for elementary students so that they can learn the basics of 1940s South America with some cartoons thrown in to grab their attention. That's why I think The Three Caballeros has the leverage over Saludos Amigos as a movie. While it still has that same educational aspect, it could still be enjoyed as its own picture without the need of understanding Walt Disney's South American goodwill tour. I'm not saying that Saludos Amigos is bad for what it's doing. You'll definitely learn about a bit of Latin American culture during the early 20th century. It's just that what it mainly wants to do is not be an animated film or even a collection of cartoons to entertain the audience, but to teach people about South America. And that's an extremely niche mindset to ask your audience to get into in order to deliver your substance.
He also studied history, Pedro, and geography.
However, that doesn't mean that the movie didn't try to entertain the viewer. There was an attempt to keep itself amusing while talking about life in South America, but I think the results of that are pretty mixed. The first half can be pretty dull with some typical kids' cartoons like Lake Titicaca and Pedro. They can have some cute moments, and they're not awful per se. It's just that they are far from the most engaging shorts Disney made in a way that's either comical or endearing, and they most likely fall in the forgettable category. The second half, on the other hand, does give the film a boost with the better segments like El Gaucho Goofy easily being the funniest part of the film, and Aquarela do Brasil makes this more interesting with the way that Brazil is literally being painted to life.
Senhor Brasil, Brasil pra mim.
Although it is weird how the movie just abruptly ends. Like, there's no proper conclusion that it delivers. It just decided that the characters are having fun, show up a scenic view, and is like, well, I guess this is a good spot to end this off. Might as well put up that the end card. Okay, bye. I'll give it that there are a few good moments in this, but are they enough to make the whole viewing experience worth it for everyone? Most likely not. Again, this is not to say that what it tried to do is bad. If you're looking for an educational video about South America during the 1940s with some Disney cartoons in between, then this is the movie for you. The only problem is that I don't know if there is a demand for that kind of content nowadays. The animation. Maybe you won't get it throughout the entire picture, but at the very least, one great thing that you'll get from Saludos Amigos is that classic Disney animation. And not just that, but it's the kind that brings Donald and Goofy to life doing what they do best. And the fact that it was released straight after some of their masterpieces like Fantasia and Bambi means that the quality would be in the same league, right? Well, not exactly. Keep in mind that this was a government-funded project. They didn't have the same budget or ambition that they had for films like Pinocchio, where the animators wanted to push the medium to new heights. During Saludos Amigos, the studio could only work with what they had. They were recovering from some major financial losses, they just started to settle in as a unionized workplace, almost half of the employees quit because of how Walt showed his true colors during the strike, and a good chunk of the money was already spent on the 3-month trip itself. The best that the animators could do under those circumstances was to play it safe and stick to what they regularly do with their cartoons and shorts, where the backgrounds were inspired by what the group experienced during the tour, and for the animators to play around with the personalities. But while this may not be some of their best animation at the time, that doesn't change that the animation is still wonderful to look at. From a visual perspective, the research that was done paid off, where the animators nicely emulated what they have seen with watercolor backgrounds showing a more abstract depiction of South America that emphasizes their use of bold colors. There can be a fair debate regarding how the depictions of the inhabitants can be seen as outdated and maybe even a bit stereotypical, but there's nothing that they do that seems out of line and are only found in the Lake Titicaca segment, so it's fine. Besides, they always find a way to one-up Donald.
Gracias! Muchas gracias!
As for the character animation, they do more of the work on the characters' acting than the vocal performances, especially when most of the comedy is physical like slapstick. And as I've said, the best comedic moments can be found in the Goofy segments, featuring great timing on the gags to show his mishaps and making both Goofy and the horse a fun dysfunctional duo.
Thanks to the palenque, or snubbing post, the horse is soon brought under control and is ready for the saddle.
But of course, the visual highlight of this picture is the Aquarela do Brasil scene, an almost Fantasia-like segment that shows off its artistic side and emphasizes the use of watercolors as if we're watching it being made, and themed to the song that shares the segment's title. But there is one more important note regarding the animation of Saludos Amigos, something that is possibly the trip's biggest contribution to the medium. If there was one person whom the Goodwill Tour changed their life forever, it was Mary Blair. During that time, like the other artists, she was making artwork based on what she was seeing for research. But as she was making more concepts there, her art style was gradually more influenced by the Latin American culture. They became more abstract, more colorful, and put more emphasis on shapes. As a result, Mary Blair's biggest discovery from the tour was her signature style, something that she later put into good use with Disney to become one of the most renowned female artists in animation. And if there is one notable aspect about Saludos Amigos in animation history, it's that it gave audiences their first taste of Blair's true work.
All these impressions, together with the local color that had been absorbed, resulted in a little travelogue.
Maybe this is not some of the best visuals you'll find from Disney during that era, but that doesn't change that there can be some great animation that can be found. And when it's at its strongest, it still has that ability to mesmerize viewers with its creativity. At least visually, Disney was able to deliver on presenting the beauty of South America. The characters. Okay, at this point I am fully aware that my reviewing format is becoming unorthodox when it comes to talking about this particular movie. Then again, I've already done a review of Fantasia a few years back, so that's not gonna stop me. As the focus is more on South American culture, there are no central characters to follow throughout. Even Walt and his team are more in the background, playing as the avatars for American audiences to know what it's like to be tourists in those countries, but through their artistic perspective.
This is what can happen to a big city when a crowd of cartoonists are turned loose.
In fact, if there would be one consistent character during the whole picture, it would have to be the narrator played by Fred Shields, educating the audience about life in South America while sprinkling in some comedy with puns and quips to give the film a bit of a personality.
In the village, we find this quaint old bakery where the tourist may loaf around to his heart's content.
In other words, he's responsible for bringing in that old-style cheesiness to the tone. And while it may not be for everyone, I could see how some people will be amused by that. However, this is not to say that the characters are insignificant in this feature. They still play a role in their respective shorts to also guide audiences regarding certain aspects of Latin American culture. Rather, if they did their job well, I wouldn't go that far. First, you have Donald, who shows up in Lake Titicaca and Aquarela do Brasil. Like Walt and the Artist, Donald Duck plays the American tourist, where he's first discovering a new culture that he never experienced before. But much like in his cartoons, he always ends up becoming the butt of the joke due to his ignorance, while the South American character next to him is always calm and know what they're doing. You know, the typical cartoon shenanigans. However, I was surprised to discover that Saludos Amigos originated a particular Donald Duck meme. Alongside Donald during Aquarela do Brasil is the debut of a new character that would become a Brazilian favorite, José Carioca. In Saludos Amigos, he introduces Donald to the culture of Brazil, especially its music with the samba. And thanks to the performance of Zé Oliveira, he adds this authenticity to him that feels like he's an enjoyable personification of Brazilian music.
Donald, now you have the spirit of the samba.
Also, there is Pedro, the little airplane on his first job to deliver the mail. He's supposed to be Disney's representation of Chile, but there's honestly not much that seems like he has any recognizable traits that are South American, let alone something that makes him a Chilean character. There's even a rumor that one artist, known as Peppo, was unamused by the blandness of Pedro that he decided to create his own cartoon that is genuinely Chilean, resulting in one of the most famous Latin American comic strip characters, Condorito. Rather, if that's real or not, I could see why he'd feel that way, because Pedro is the common little engine that could archetype.
Uh-oh. I was afraid of that.
And then there is Goofy. On one hand, he does his usual shtick like he does in his cartoons, with presenting the subject of the short in his own clumsy way. Then again, I think the Goofy tunes are pretty underrated with how they are the funniest shorts from Disney, and this one is no different. With how he shows what it takes to be a gaucho and his dynamic with the horse, it's like he does what Donald wished he could do with his segments by supplying some solid comedy.
Yes, it is this wholesome diet that builds the gaucho's nerves of steel and muscles of iron.
Also, you may have heard that there was a scene that Disney censored where Goofy smoked a cigarette. But thankfully, in the recent versions that are available, including the one on Disney+, they are completely unedited and keep the smoking part intact. Which is great because now you don't have to watch Goofy awkwardly stare at you for a while.
Howdy, strangers.
This colorful cowhand of the Great West has his counterpart in the South American gaucho.
Yes, they can add a little piece of amusement in their own way, but they're still not enough to help make the movie feel engaging. They're like generic cartoons with not much to remember by, and even when the characters are able to stand out, they're only effective during their segments, and they stick to what they normally do in their own shorts anyways. If there's anything that can be considered memorable in this feature, I don't think the characters and their contributions will be among them. In the 1940s, it was an important tool to strengthen the bond of the United States and South America. Nowadays, it can barely stand on its own. Saludos Amigos is a movie that is catered to the nichiest of niche groups. As its own feature, at best, it's just okay. It does have some nice animation, there are some enjoyable moments in the second half, and you may learn a thing or two about Latin America, but I do consider this one of Disney's weaker films and easily among their most forgettable. There is certainly an audience for this, but they are very specific, where the ones who will get the most enjoyment out of it is Disney fans who either have a big interest in Disney history and want to learn more about Walt's Goodwill Tour, or want to be in a South American mood. However, if you don't fit in those categories, there is a way that can help you get a bit more into your experience with this movie. My personal recommendation is to go and watch the documentary Walt and El Grupo. It's a great film that dives deep into what happened during that trip, that also discusses about the other people who joined Walt, the locals who interacted with them, and what they experienced during that time. Not to mention that it doesn't shy away from the issues that were going on, like the strike. It's worth watching as is, and you can easily find it on Disney Plus, or you can actually buy the DVD, but it's also a great way to have a better understanding of the film that resulted from it. And if you'd like more of an understanding of the movies you watch, then press that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet, so that you'll learn a lot more about your favorite cartoons and features. By the way, did I forget to mention that this is the shortest Disney animated movie at only 42 minutes? Yeah, even this review is over half as long as the film, and like I said before, it finishes sooner than you could expect. There definitely is a lot of history to be found in Saludos Amigos, but hard to say that there's much else beyond that. Hey guys, this is Animat, and I'm gonna be very honest with you all. I did not expect that this review would turn out to be as long as it did. In fact, it's actually very rare that I would go and actually make a review like this that would end up becoming over half as long as the actual movie itself. But then again, considering that we are talking about Saludos Amigos, and as I just stated before, it's only 42 minutes long, that is an accomplishment that is not hard to go and actually achieve. But there is a fair reason why, because when it comes to Saludos Amigos, it's hard to talk about the movie itself without mentioning the history that went behind it, because that aspect is very much essential. And what happened was that, I guess, the history side of me, or the historian side of me, kind of got the best of me, where I really dive deep into the whole history and everything that happened, not just with Saludos Amigos, but also what happened to Walt Disney's South American Goodwill Tour. It's a very fascinating thing to look into. And again, I just want to go and mention, this is also why that, well, I would even say more so than Saludos Amigos, that I highly recommend that you go and check out the documentary Walt and El Grupo, which not only you could find on Disney Plus, but I have here the DVD of it. And there is actually one great benefit when it comes to actually getting the DVD, is that one of the bonus features, believe it or not, is the entirety and the unedited version of Saludos Amigos. So what you can do, even if you just pop this up, like put the disc on the DVD player, you could just watch the documentary, and optionally, you could go and watch Saludos Amigos afterwards to have more of an understanding to it. So if you do actually collect DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff like that, I highly recommend to have this as well in your collection, if you can go and find it, of course, which I feel very fortunate that I did have this, especially when it was very helpful with making this review. All right, so now that we are officially done with Saludos Amigos, it is now time that we shall go and move on to a Patreon request. And this time around, I got a Patreon request from an individual who called themselves Official PSASD. So from there, if you would like to be like Official PSASD, and you would like to get some amazing rewards, including but not limited to watching my videos before anyone else, and also supporting my work at the same time, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/animat. But at the same time, if you would like to request an animated film you would like me to review and that I would put onto the animation hat, then all you have to do is write me an email at animatsreviews@gmail.com. All right, so with that said, what is it that the official PSASD, requested me to go and review what is the next movie that we are going to be looking into. Well, we actually got a pretty famous tale, one that animation fans especially are very familiar with. We've heard many different takes about this story, but the truth of the matter is there is only one concrete one that actually did happen, and we are about to dive into that one. Yes, folks, for our next review, we are going to be looking into the story of the Shark Slayer.
I thought I'd never get that boner.